Hi everybody, so today I've got another video talking about a tournament army. This time it is my sort of tweaked Saim-Hann army. This particular one got me second overall at a recent Toronto tourney called Astronomy Minicon. It's the precursor to the large Astronomicon tournament, which I hope to be able to go to if I have time later this summer. But this army is a Saim-Hann army. As you can see, tons of Jetbikes everywhere. So for all you Eldar noobs, Saim-Hann simply means a Jetbike style of army. It doesn't mean that every single thing in your army is a Jetbike. It just means that you do have lots of Jetbikes. You rely on them as your primary source of troops. And in fact, this army has only Jetbikes as troops. So, that's one interesting quality about it. We're going to talk about the army, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and, why it might be worthwhile for you to consider this type of army. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about the army itself. How does the army work? Well, put very simply, it's a maneuverability army. So it's about maneuvering around your opponent, picking your battles, and concentrating your firepower. This is not the kind of army where you have a lot of units that can individually go off on their own and just kind of conquer a part of the board. I mean, it's not a Space Marine army that has units that are capable of that. What it is you use your speed to split your enemy in half. A lot of times your opponent will have things set up on different parts of the board. Well, turn one, you pick a part of the board, you go towards that side, and you annihilate that side. And then you move on to the next one. You do not want to give your opponent a fair fight. Your guys are more expensive than his, for probably slightly worse stats than he has, but you have superior speed. So you're going to abuse that speed as much as possible to divide your opponent. Pounce and prey on things that are weaker or that can be defeated with concentrated firepower. What kind of firepower do you have? You have 6 strength 6 shots at 24-inch range from the 2 shuriken cannons in each of the troop units. You also have a 12-inch range, twin-linked assault 2 strength 4 guns from the regular troopers, and you have a singing spear, which is a 12-inch range, kind of like a las cannon, essentially, without particularly amazing armor-piercing quality. But of course, because you have a 6-inch move in the assault phase, you can shoot 12 inches, then jet away so that you won't be assaulted by a standard unit. So you can use that. These guys do not have any long-range firepower, but they do have twin-linked strength 4 assault 2 guns, just like these guys. However, they are twin-linked at ballistic skill of 4 instead of 3. So they're actually hitting very often with their guns. 2 of the guys have heavy flamer equivalents. Pretty effective stuff for short-range blasting and flying away. The long-range firepower mostly comes from these guys. 60 inches, strength 9, AP2, small templates are the most common one you're going to use. You also have the option of a large template that's strength 5, AP4. You can also twin-link these vehicles. So the 2 of them fire. You pick one that fires. The other one just needs to have line of sight to him. So this one would work over here. And that distance that it can have line of sight is actually infinite. That was confirmed in the FAQ. That distance can be infinite as long as he has line of sight. Pretty interesting. And what does that do? It raises the strength and it lowers the AP by 1. So strength 10 AP1 for small blasts, or strength 6 AP3 for large blasts. Pretty good at killing things like Marines. These guys also are a firepower unit in the army. They have 24 strength 6 shots at 36-inch range. That's one of the reasons I've taken these guys instead of Vipers in this army. I just couldn't afford the Vipers anymore after outfitting my troops, and these guys actually have better firepower than Vipers, even though, of course, they are not nearly as cool for the theme, and they are also on foot. They're not as fast. But these guys are going to be used to gun down things like monstrous creatures. Demon Prince coming your way, fire 24 strength 6 shots at him and watch as he has to make a billion arm saves, right? You got a ton of Space Marines nearby. These guys can, on average, gun down about 4 or 5 Space Marines from a unit per turn, and that's with average luck. With a little bit of bad luck on your opponent's part, you can gun down a lot more Space Marines because you're going to be forcing a lot of saves. You have a little bit of firepower, but your firepower is not spectacular. It's tied up in these guys, so you want to protect them as much as possible. And it's also tied up in these guys, so you need to keep them at the corners of the board. Stay away. Don't give your opponent the option to shoot things in the middle of the board at these guys. Force him to use his super long-range weapons to try to threaten these tanks, and use your range as well. It's a fast army. It's not a super resilient army, although these guys are all the equivalent of Space Marines, if you think about it. Toughness 4, 3+ armor save. So they're actually just as survivable as regular Space Marines, despite costing a lot more. But then again, you don't have that many of them, so you've got to protect them. Got to protect them. Use your speed. pick a part of the board and fly over to it with most of your army and wipe it out. Or if you're going to attack something, use two or three units at one thing. Make sure you wipe it out before you move on to other targets. Okay, let's talk about each one of the sections. Let's talk HQ. So we've got Farseer plus 6 Warlocks. As you know, a Warlock unit is bought in the HQ section, although they take up no HQ slot, but you're only allowed to buy them if you get a Farseer. So that's what we've done here. Now, Farseer is pretty much as cheap as he can be. He's on a Jetbike. He's been given Fortune, the most important power for these guys. It allows them to re-roll all their saves. That includes invulnerable saves, armor saves, cover saves, things like that. And he's also has Runes of Witnessing to make sure that power goes off. Plus, we'll talk about he's got the help of Embolden in there to make sure that happens again. And he also has Runes of Warding, a very crucial piece of gear in a tournament army. It really hoses over opponents' psychic powers, forces them to roll 3 dice when they make their psychic tests. Pretty simple, pretty basic guy, has slightly higher weapon skill, slightly higher initiative than these guys. So that's kind of helpful as well. Now, the 6 Warlocks, they have Witchblades. So, as you may know, Witchblades always wound on a 2+, even though they do not ignore armor saves. And they always count as Strength 9 against vehicles. They're devastating weapons against vehicles, and pretty nasty weapons even against things that are just infantry models. Very good weapons. These guys, of course, fly like anything else. And there's 2 guys that have the equivalent of a Heavy Flamer, Destructor. Very useful power. 2 guys that have Embolden, which allows you to re-roll leadership checks. Crucial on these guys, because you do not want 2 of them dying and having the unit run away, or losing combat by 1 and suddenly getting cleaved down. That's just a disaster. You do not want that to happen. Why do we have 2 Emboldens instead of 1? Because it is such an important power, and it is so cheap that we've put 2 in there, because due to wound allocation rules, you might be forced, let's just say this is the guy that has it, you might be forced to allocate on him. 7 wounds get caused. They're probably not even going to cause a single failed save with Fortune, but you never know. And what if this is the guy that dies? Suddenly you've lost Embolden, and that really sucks. Embolden's a crucial power, so you've got 2 of it in the unit. And the last guy has Enhance, which is a great power, gives these guys higher weapon skill, higher initiative, really makes sure that those Witchblades hit, because you know that they're probably going to wound, so you need as many hits as possible. And against regular Space Marines, that's going to increase your odds dramatically by having Enhance. So, these guys are the linchpin of your army. They tie up enemy units. They can cleave down non-elite units. They can sometimes even cleave down elite units just because you're forcing so many saves. And they're going to survive against things even that have power weapons pretty darn well. They're going to cause a lot of trouble for your opponent. They might die in a lot of games, but usually they will cause a disproportionate amount of suffering for your opponent. They're really going to tie him up, screw up his battle plans, maybe even just cleave through him if they get a little bit lucky. Let's talk the troop section. So I've got 3 squads of 6 Jetbikes plus a Warlock on Jetbike. So you've got 3 troop selections, which is pretty reasonable in a 1,500 point army, especially when you're talking Eldar. Our codex is so old, our troops are so expensive to field that having 3 of them at 1,500 points is pretty good actually. On average, that's actually more than a lot of players tend to manage in 1,500 points. At least in an army that's going to be competitive. Now, what do these guys have? Each squad has the requisite 2 shuriken cannons, because you've got 6 guys. You're allowed 1 for every 3 models in the unit. So shuriken cannons are crucial. They're only 10 points each. They give you long range firepower, strength 6, very effective to put them in there. And each squad also has a Warlock on Jetbike. And for each one of these guys, I've given the Warlocks Embolden and a Singing Spear. Embolden is to make sure these guys don't run off the board. It gives you re-rollable leadership. Now, their leadership is disastrous. It's only 8 for a bunch of 22-point models that are supposed to be in an elite army. They have only a leadership 8, and the worst part of all is when you add a squad leader, a sergeant type of character, he does not increase their leadership. How unfair is that, eh? Every other codex, for the most part, when you add a leader type guy to the unit, that costs 50 points. You increase leadership, he does not increase leadership. So you've got to get the Embolden to give them a reroll on the leadership. Statistically, the reroll is actually better than if you had +1 leadership. So I'm okay with that, because it gives them a pretty good chance of sticking around. The Singing Spear on these guys, the reason I've taken that in this army is because I want these guys to be shooty. I don't need the Witchblade as much because I'm not planning on going into combat, because these guys suck terribly in combat, only strength 3. And I want to have another extra shot that really has a good chance to hurt a vehicle. And the Singing Spear is basically a short-range las cannon. It's a range 12, strength 9, shot, assault shot. Of course, it doesn't have great AP, but you don't care about that against vehicles. So it gives these guys a chance to fly up, fire strength 6 into the side armor, and maybe throw another las cannon type shot into the side and have a chance to blow it up. Because this army, struggles to blow up vehicles. Pretty much these guys are good at blowing up vehicles. They're good at blowing up, transports. You need something, so we've got some strength 9 shots in there. With these units, you've got to be very careful with them. They suck at melee. Now, of course, if we're talking about 2 remaining guardsmen, then go ahead and charge them, right? But if we're talking about like 3 Space Marines, even, that's a tough choice. I don't think that's even great odds for these guys to charge 3 basic Space Marines. I mean, it's not terrible. It's in your favor, but I mean, if things go slightly badly and you lose combat by 1, suddenly you might just be getting run down, right? So they're not great at combat, but they are good at shooting because each guy has twin linked, 2 shots, strength 4. Unfortunately, only 12-inch range, but you can use your free Jetbike move. As you know, Jetbikes go 12 inches in the movement phase and then an extra 6 inches in the assault phase. So you can fly in, gun something down that's within 12 inches, and then fly back 6 inches so that you cannot get assaulted by a standard type of trooper, right? Something that does not have fleet or that does not fly will not be able to assault you. So think of that. Let's talk heavy support. So first of all, we've got 2 fire prisms in this army. Fire prism tanks, heavy tanks. They have crappy little gun down here, which you can upgrade to a shuriken cannon. I have not done that in this particular army. I did not have enough points left. But they come with their standard gun, which has 2 modes. One of them is Strength 9 AP2 Small Blast, and the other is Strength 5 AP4 Large Blast, which you can increase because you can twin link these tanks. If one tank fires, and the other tank has line of sight to that tank at all, which this one does, which interestingly enough in the FAQ it's clarified, it can be an infinite range to be able to connect beams as long as he just sees him. That's not going to matter too much, but for Apocalypse games you might be able to pull off some shenanigans. And when you link the beams, it becomes twin linked, so you can re-roll all the dice if you're drifting terribly. It also increases the strength by 1 and the AP by lowers it by 1. So for instance, strength 9 AP2 becomes strength 10 AP2. Strength 5 AP3 becomes strength 6 AP3. Sorry, strength 5 AP4 becomes strength 6 AP3. So pretty effective. I don't tend to use it too often though because this army is already low on firepower, so using 2 tanks to fire 1 shot instead of firing 2 separate ones, that's a tough choice. But sometimes you need to. If you're facing a Land Raider, there's not a lot of ways to kill Land Raiders in this army, so that's one of the only ways. Strength 10 AP1, twin link shot. The last part of the heavy support section is the Warwalkers. These, put simply, are a cheap firepower unit. They pump out 24 strength 6 shots at 36-inch range. I mean, they are all about the firepower. They're very cheap. Because they're a squadron, you can get some squadron cover if 2 of the guys are 50% or more cover. The third guy gets it. One of them dies and only one of them needs to be in cover. You have some options with these guys. They are capable of outflanking because they can scout. So you can outflank them for some tricks. There's not a lot of tricks in this army. Almost everything is pretty much the way you see it. Your opponent knows what it does. But suddenly you can throw a wrench in your opponent's plans by having these guys outflank if you want. I don't recommend that every single game because outflanking is unreliable. Especially in this army, you have no way of increasing your reserves, or your reserved rolls rather. So that's unreliable, but in some situations it might help. So consider that. Like I said, they're a firepower unit. They are meant to gun down demon princes, trigons, monstrous creatures. They can blow away infantry pretty well too because there's so many shots. They're just extremely useful. They can even bust open things that are armor 11 or lower pretty consistently because you're going to get a lot of strength 6 hits in, and eventually you're going to get that 5 or 6 to glance or penetrate. So pretty good firepower unit there. Okay, what are these armies' strengths? We've touched on it already, but the biggest strength, of course, is speed. Simply, you're able to maneuver to any objective on the board anytime. I mean, these guys can go 24 inches towards an objective. They can also go 12 inches, fire at something, go another 6. Essentially, anything that's on a jetbike realistically has an 18-inch move every turn. And the beauty of that move is that 6 inches of it are always in any direction you want. So you can do all kinds of screwy moves. Come in here, gun down a guy that's 12 inches away, move slightly behind a building to get cover for the. There's some amazing things you can do with jet bikes. Another strength is that you have, besides the speed, is that you have decent resilience for an Eldar army. It's actually very shocking resilience because each guy that's on a jet bike has this survivability, the defensive stats of a Space Marine. Toughness 4, 3+ armor save. These guys also have a 4+ invulnerable. And with fortune on these guys, they're going to survive very well. These are essentially pretty hard to gun down with ease. Now that doesn't mean you're not going to get gunned down. If you allow your opponent protracted shooting rounds, these guys are going to get shot down like anything, right? They're going to fail saves, and worst of all, your leadership is crappy. Even though you have a reroll, so it's dangerous there. But you have a lot more resilience than most Eldar troops do have. In terms of weaknesses, this army struggles against a few things. First of all, it has relatively moderate amounts of firepower for its point size. An Imperial Guard player is very easily going to outshoot you. A lot of Space Marine players are very easily going to outshoot you. But their shooting is not as maneuverable. It's kind of static. It tends to stay in one place. That's what these guys are for. These guys are for going after that static, those static tank squadrons, those tanks that are just like lumbering around, not moving very far, blowing you away. So that's their job, is to wipe out all those static defenses, and they do it very, very nicely. Another weakness you have is that you don't have a lot of easy ways to kill things like Land Raiders, things with armor 14 from the front. Best way, strength 9 AP2, single shots, or twin linked to increase the beam strength. It'll be strength 10 AP1. That's pretty much it. Now, each one of the squads has a Singing Spear, which is the equivalent of strength 9 against vehicles, as well as these guys have Witchblades. They get extra attacks as a result because they're using the Witchblade plus pistol. And they could theoretically bust through it. On a 6, you're going to penetrate the armor on a Land Raider, and on a 5, you're going to glance it. Not amazingly reliable, though, so you don't want to, if that's the only thing you have left to do, then go for it. There's an empty Land Raider, hey, why not send these guys after it, right? But you're not going to have a lot of easy ways to bust open Land Raiders, so that is going to be a weakness of this army. You're going to have to chicken away from those, really nasty melee squads inside Land Raider as long as possible until you can feed the council to it, and then just tie up whatever's inside for as long as possible. Other weaknesses, your firepower units are quite fragile. There's no holofields on here, unfortunately. Couldn't afford the points. And these guys are pretty fragile. They're only armor 10. You're going to try to move them in such a way so that you get cover. But, if your opponent has a few lucky rounds of shooting, he's going to be able to silence your heavy firepower relatively quickly. You're going to have to rely on your short-range shooting, like the Singing Spears on these guys, or you're going to have to rely on these guys to really kind of hold the fort down for you. Not an easy army to play, not a very forgiving army, but, pretty rewarding to have fun with, and it looks great on the tabletop. Once you have a whole squad, a whole set of jet bikes, it just looks really cool. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Keep playing, keep sending me questions if you have questions about Eldar, about, army lists and things. I'm always happy to answer. And see you around.